Clint Eastwood, the soldier who fell from the sky and lived to tell the story. The cold wind howled through the streets of Paris, whipping around the remnants of a city that had once been a beacon of culture and freedom. Rubble lay strewn across the cobblestones, the echoes of laughter and music now replaced by the distant rumble of military vehicles and the haunting wails of sirens. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting shadows that danced like ghosts among the ruins, one thought consumed the mind of a young soldier: what does it truly mean to fight for your country? Clint Eastwood, a fresh-faced soldier barely out of his teens, stood before a dilapidated building on the outskirts of the city, the weight of his gear pressing down upon him. His heart raced in his chest, each beat a reminder of the mission ahead. A mission that could mean life or death, not just for him, but for countless others. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up and your instincts scream to run. But there was no running now, he was committed. With a final glance at his comrades, Clint tightened the straps of his parachute harness and looked up at the sky, where dark clouds loomed ominously. They were set to jump behind enemy lines, tasked with gathering intelligence on Nazi movements. Yet, as he stared into the heavens, doubt crept into his mind. Am I ready for this? Am I ready to take a life, to possibly lose mine? Just then, a voice broke through his thoughts. It was Sergeant Harold Hawk Hawkins, his mentor and a man who wore his battle scars like badges of honor. Hawk was grizzled, his face marked by lines of experience and sorrow, eyes that had seen the worst of humanity. "You good, Clint?" he asked, his tone firm but laced with a hint of concern. "Yeah, Sarge." "Just thinking," Clint replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Don't think too hard. Keep your focus. War is chaos, you either drown in it or learn to swim." Hawk's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of wisdom forged in the fires of combat. Clint nodded, but the knot in his stomach tightened. As they prepared to board the transport plane, memories flashed before Clint's eyes. He recalled the quiet moments at home in California, the laughter of friends, the warmth of family dinners. Each memory felt like a distant dream, a reminder of what he stood to lose. Yet here he was, a soldier ready to face the unknown, driven by a sense of duty and a flickering hope that he could make a difference. The plane roared to life, and Clint took a deep breath, allowing the hum of the engines to drown out his fears. The journey was short, but every passing moment felt like an eternity. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, mixing with a sense of impending dread. This was it, the moment he had trained for, yet never truly prepared for. As the plane climbed to altitude, the crew chief signaled for readiness. 30 seconds, he shouted over the noise. Clint's heart pounded, and he exchanged a quick glance with Hawk. In that fleeting moment, an unspoken bond passed between them, one forged by trust, and perhaps, an understanding of the fragility of life. When the green light illuminated the cabin, chaos erupted. Soldiers surged forward, and Clint followed suit, stepping out into the void. The cold air hit him like a slap in the face as he plummeted toward the earth, the ground rushing up to meet him. But then, a sudden jolt. The parachute deployed, and Clint was yanked upward, the rush of air transforming into a deafening roar. As he descended, he caught sight of the sprawling landscape below, a patchwork of fields and forests marred by the scars of war. Then came the realization, something was wrong. The parachute twisted violently, caught in a gust of wind that sent him spiraling off course. Panic surged through him as he fought to regain control, but it was too late. He could see the trees approaching faster than he could react. With a sickening thud, Clint collided with the ground, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs. Pain exploded across his body, and darkness threatened to pull him under. For a moment, he lay there, gasping for air, the world spinning around him. When he finally opened his eyes, the reality of his situation hit like a freight train. He was alone, disoriented, and separated from his unit, deep behind enemy lines. Clint struggled to sit up, gritting his teeth against the pain that radiated from his leg. He glanced around, the eerie silence of the forest amplifying his sense of isolation. The initial thrill of the jump had vanished, replaced by a gnawing fear. He was now a target, vulnerable and exposed. "What do I do now?" he muttered to himself, the question echoing in the stillness. As he attempted to stand, a rustle in the underbrush caught his attention. Clint instinctively reached for his sidearm, heart racing as he prepared for the worst. But instead of an enemy soldier, a figure emerged, a woman, dressed in a tattered nurse's uniform, her face pale but resolute. Marta Becker had been tending to the wounded in a nearby makeshift hospital when she heard the thump of the parachute landing. She had seen the devastation wrought by the war, an unwilling participant in a conflict that had torn her world apart. But now, in the shadow of the trees, she was faced with a choice: help the enemy or turn away. The moment their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Clint, with his youthful determination and fear, and Marta, with her quiet strength and compassion. In that brief encounter, two lives collided, and the lines of allegiance blurred against the backdrop of war. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos that surrounded them. Clint nodded, his voice hoarse. "I think I've twisted my ankle. I need to get back to my unit." "You're far from home," Marta replied, glancing back toward the direction from which she had come. "You can't go back alone. You'll be caught." The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on Clint. He had been trained to see the enemy as a faceless threat, but in this moment, he found himself at a crossroads. The instinct to fight for his side battled against the realization that survival might depend on an alliance with the very person he was supposed to fear. "I can help you," Marta offered, her eyes earnest. "But you have to trust me." Clint hesitated, the internal struggle evident on his face. Trust was a luxury in wartime, and yet something in her gaze told him that she was more than just a soldier of the enemy. As the sounds of distant gunfire echoed through the woods, he felt time slipping away. "Okay," he finally said, the word heavy with uncertainty. "I'll trust you." And with that, the first chapter of their intertwined fates began, a soldier and a nurse caught in the relentless tide of war, each carrying their own burdens, yet bound by a shared humanity that transcended the conflicts surrounding them. The sun barely peeked through the tattered clouds as Clint Eastwood pulled himself from the twisted remains of his parachute. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and gunpowder, and the sound of distant explosions rumbled like thunder, reminding him of the chaos that had brought him to this moment. He was alone, separated from his squad, with only the weight of his mission pressing heavily on his shoulders. As he surveyed his surroundings, a deep sense of fear washed over him. The streets of Paris, now a battlefield, were filled with dangers both seen and unseen. Clint crouched low, his heart racing, as he tried to remember the plan his sergeant had outlined before the drop. "Stick together, watch each other's backs," Hawk had said. But now, with only the sound of his own breath echoing in his ears, Clint felt the reality of his isolation. Just a few blocks away, the distant sounds of German soldiers patrolling the streets sent a chill down his spine. He needed to find shelter, a place to gather his thoughts and assess his injuries. His leg throbbed where he had landed awkwardly, and he could feel the sting of a cut on his forehead. Clint took a moment to breathe, fighting back the panic threatening to engulf him. As he moved cautiously down a narrow alley, he spotted a figure darting between the shadows. A woman, her hair pinned back tightly, dressed in a simple nurse's uniform. Clint's instincts kicked in, and he raised his rifle, ready to defend himself. "Wait," she called out, her voice a mixture of urgency and fear. "Please, I won't hurt you." Clint hesitated, lowering his weapon slightly but keeping his guard up. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "Marta Becker," she replied, her eyes wide with concern. "I'm a nurse." "You're hurt. Let me help you." Clint's mind raced. She was German, the enemy. But the desperation in her voice couldn't be ignored. He felt the weight of his situation bearing down on him. The streets were dangerous, and trust was a luxury he could not afford, yet this could be his only chance to survive. "Why would you help me?" he asked, skepticism etched across his features. "Because this war takes lives indiscriminately," she replied, taking a cautious step closer. "I've seen enough suffering on both sides. Just let me help you." Clint's instincts were screaming at him, but something in her eyes told a different story. With no other options, he nodded slowly, allowing her to approach. Okay. But I'm watching you. She led him through the maze of alleys, her fingers deftly guiding him while she whispered directions that only someone familiar with the city would know. As they reached a small, dimly lit room in a crumbling building, Clint felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Inside, Marta quickly set to work, examining his injuries with a gentle touch. "You're lucky. It could have been worse," she murmured as she cleaned the cut on his forehead. The soft brush of her fingers made Clint acutely aware of how vulnerable he was, lying there in the hands of the enemy. "Why are you helping me?" he asked again, his voice softer now, tinged with a hint of curiosity. Marta paused, meeting his gaze. "Because I believe we must find our humanity amid the chaos. And because I cannot stand by and let someone suffer when I can help." Their eyes locked for a moment, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Clint's heart raced, not just from the pain, but from the realization that they were both caught in a web of conflict far beyond their control. As she bandaged his leg, Clint felt an unfamiliar warmth spreading within him. Here was a woman who, despite her circumstances, chose compassion over hatred. But a nagging doubt lingered in his mind. Was he risking his life by trusting her? "Listen, I overheard something," Clint said suddenly, trying to focus on the situation at hand. "There are plans for an attack. I need to get back to my unit and warn them." Marta's expression shifted, a fleeting shadow crossing her face. "You can't go out there. They will catch you, and they won't hesitate to kill you. You need to stay hidden." "I can't just sit here and do nothing," Clint replied, frustration bubbling to the surface. "People's lives are at stake." "Your life is at stake too," Marta countered, her tone firm yet compassionate. "You don't understand what it's like out there. The streets are crawling with patrols. You'll be shot before you take 10 steps. Clint clenched his jaw, torn between the urgency of his mission and the growing bond he felt with Marta. "I have to try. If I can get back to my squad, we can stop whatever they're planning." Marta looked at him, her eyes searching. "And what if you get caught? What happens to me then?" He opened his mouth to respond, but the weight of her question hung in the air, heavy with implications. "I won't let anything happen to you," Clint finally said, although his tone lacked conviction. He couldn't promise her safety when he didn't know if he could ensure his own. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of boots marching outside, the unmistakable cadence of a patrol. Clint's heart dropped as he instinctively moved closer to the shadows, gripping his rifle tightly. Marta joined him, her breath hitching in her throat. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. The footsteps grew louder, and Clint could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. He could see the silhouette of a soldier through the cracked window, scanning the alleyway. Time seemed to stand still as Clint held his breath, praying they wouldn't be discovered. After what felt like an eternity, the soldier moved on, and the sound of their boots faded into the distance. But Clint knew they wouldn't be safe for long. The patrols would return, and he had to make a choice. "Listen, I need to get back out there," he said, urgency creeping back into his voice. "No," Marta insisted, shaking her head. "You'll die. We need to find another way." Clint took a deep breath, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "What do you suggest? Sit here and wait for them to come and find me? Maybe we can find a way to send a message," she proposed, her eyes lighting up with a glimmer of hope. "I have connections within the resistance. If we can get you to a safe house, they can relay the information to your command." Clint considered her words, weighing the risks. "And what if they turn me in?" "They won't," she said, conviction lacing her tone. "They are fighting for freedom, just like you. They understand what it means to be caught in this war." The thought of trusting someone else, especially in such dire circumstances, made Clint's stomach churn. But the alternative, staying hidden, waiting for the inevitable, felt equally suffocating. "All right," he finally said, his voice steady. "I'll follow your lead. But if anything goes wrong, I promise to keep you safe," Marta replied, her gaze unwavering. As they prepared to leave the safety of the room, Clint felt a surge of determination. He had come this far, and he wouldn't let fear dictate his actions. If he could warn his squad, he could save lives, maybe even his own. "Before we go, I need you to promise me something," Clint said, his voice low and earnest. "Anything," Marta replied, her brow furrowed with concern. "Promise me that when this is over, we'll find a way to meet again. No matter what side we're on." Marta's expression softened, and for a moment, the war outside faded away. "I promise," she whispered, her voice barely audible. With that, they stepped out into the uncertain night, the shadows swallowing them as they moved toward an uncertain future. As they navigated the darkened streets, Clint couldn't shake the feeling that their fates had become intertwined in ways neither of them could fully understand. He had entered this war as a soldier, but now, he was beginning to see the humanity that lay beneath the uniforms and the banners. If you're captivated by Clint and Marta's story and want to see how their paths intertwine further in this harrowing journey, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Join us as we delve deeper into the complexities of their relationship and uncover the truth of war. Stay tuned for the next chapter where the stakes are even higher, and every decision could mean life or death. The cold wind howled through the streets of Paris, whipping around the remnants of a city that had once been a beacon of culture and freedom. Rubble lay strewn across the cobblestones, the echoes of laughter and music now replaced by the distant rumble of military vehicles and the haunting wails of sirens. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting shadows that danced like ghosts among the ruins, one thought consumed the mind of a young soldier: what does it truly mean to fight for your country? Clint Eastwood, a fresh-faced soldier barely out of his teens, stood before a dilapidated building on the outskirts of the city, the weight of his gear pressing down upon him. His heart raced in his chest, each beat a reminder of the mission ahead. A mission that could mean life or death, not just for him but for those he had grown to care for. The memories of Marta, the German nurse who had saved him, flickered through his mind, a bittersweet reminder of the complex world he now inhabited. He glanced at Hawk, his mentor, whose eyes bore the weight of countless battles. Hawk's presence had always brought a sense of assurance, but now, with uncertainty clouding the air, Clint felt a twinge of doubt. "We need to move, Clint," Hawk urged, his voice low but urgent. "You've heard the rumors. We can't waste time." Clint's mind raced. The plans he had overheard during his time with Marta were crucial. An imminent attack was being plotted by the enemy, and if he didn't alert his command, countless lives would be at risk. But the thought of leaving Marta behind filled him with dread. She had put herself in harm's way to help him, and now, he would have to abandon her. What if she's caught? Clint's voice trembled with the weight of his decision. Hawk placed a firm hand on Clint's shoulder. "We can't save everyone, Clint. We have to think about the bigger picture." A surge of anger rose within Clint. What about her life? She's not the enemy, she's been our ally. The tension between them crackled like the electricity in the air before a storm. "Ally or not, it's a dangerous world out there," Hawk replied sternly. "You have to trust me. We have to go now." Clint closed his eyes, fighting against the torrent of emotions raging inside him. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his chest, threatening to suffocate him. "I'll find a way back for her," he whispered, a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. With a heavy heart, he turned his back on the only person who had shown him kindness amidst the chaos of war. Clint and Hawk slipped through the shadows, hearts pounding, the distant sounds of marching soldiers echoing in their ears. They moved like phantoms, navigating through the debris, every creak and crack of the crumbling buildings sending jolts of fear through Clint's veins. Suddenly, the sharp crack of gunfire shattered the silence. Clint ducked instinctively, feeling the rush of adrenaline as he pressed against the cold stone wall. Hawk's eyes narrowed, scanning the street. "We need to move," he hissed. They sprinted through the wreckage, the fear of capture gnawing at Clint's insides. Just as they rounded a corner, a group of enemy soldiers appeared, their uniforms dark against the twilight. Clint's heart raced as he realized they were trapped. "What do we do?" he gasped, panic rising. "Follow my lead," Hawk commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. They ducked into a narrow alleyway, the scent of gunpowder and sweat thick in the air. As they pressed against the damp brick, Clint could hear the soldiers' footsteps nearing. They were close, too close. "Do you think they saw us?" Clint whispered, his breath coming in quick bursts. Hawk shook his head, his expression grave. "No, but we can't stay here. We need to move while we can." Just as they prepared to bolt, a hand clamped down on Clint's shoulder. He spun around, fear coursing through him, only to find himself face to face with Hawk. "Wait. Listen." Hawk hissed, his eyes wide with urgency. "What is it?" Clint's voice was barely a whisper. "Those men, there's a patrol coming this way. We need a distraction." Clint's mind raced. "What if I create a diversion? I can draw them away from here." Hawk's brows furrowed. "It's too dangerous. We'll think of something else." But Clint's resolve was firm. "No. If I don't do this, we're both dead. I can't let them find us. I'll be back, I promise." Without waiting for a response, Clint bolted from the alley, running as fast as his legs could carry him. His heart thundered in his chest, drowning out the sounds of the world around him. He knew he was running towards danger, but the thought of Hawk's safety pushed him forward. As he sprinted down the street, Clint felt the adrenaline surge through him, heightening his senses. The shadows danced around him, and he could hear the distant shouts of the enemy soldiers as they began to pursue him. He darted into a side street, trying to lead them away from Hawk. The air was thick with tension, each breath a reminder of the stakes at hand. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his side as he stumbled, a bullet grazing his skin. Clint gritted his teeth against the pain, forcing himself to keep moving. He could hear the men shouting behind him, their voices growing louder. "Get him! Don't let him escape!" Clint turned a corner, desperately. Seeking refuge, his heart racing as he ducked into another alleyway. But the soldiers were relentless, their shouts echoing in his ears. Just as he thought he might escape, a figure appeared before him, an enemy soldier aiming his rifle straight at Clint. In a split second, Clint reacted instinctively. He lunged forward, tackling the soldier to the ground. The two men wrestled, a flurry of fists in desperation, but Clint managed to gain the upper hand. With a swift motion, he disarmed the man, wresting the rifle from his grasp. Breathing heavily, Clint stood over the fallen soldier, a mixture of fear and adrenaline coursing through him. He had never taken a life before, and yet here he was, faced with the reality of war. The soldier beneath him looked up, eyes wide with fear, and Clint felt a pang of compassion. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his voice trembling. "But I need to survive." Before he could think further, the sound of footsteps echoed in the alley. He had no time to hesitate. Clint took off again, his heart pounding, the weight of his actions heavy on his conscience. He rounded another corner, desperate to find Hawk. Finally, he spotted a familiar figure crouched behind a stack of crates. Hawk's eyes widened when he saw Clint, relief washing over his face. "You made it," he exclaimed, but the joy was short-lived as the sound of approaching soldiers filled the air. Clint skidded to a halt, breathless. "We need to go. They're coming." But before they could escape, a group of enemy soldiers surrounded them, their weapons drawn. Hawk stepped forward, his expression fierce. "You'll have to get through me first." Clint's heart raced as he glanced at Hawk. "No! We can't fight them. We have to run." But in that moment, a shot rang out, and Clint watched in horror as Hawk fell to the ground, clutching his side. "Hawk!" Clint shouted, rushing to his mentor's side. Blood stained Hawk's uniform as he struggled to breathe, his face pale. "Clint, you have to go," Hawk gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "You can't let this be the end. No! I won't leave you." Clint cried out, desperation flooding his voice. But then, the unexpected happened. One of the soldiers stepped forward, lifting his hand. "Wait," he shouted, surprising even his comrades. "Don't shoot. He's one of us." Clint froze, confusion clouding his mind. "What are you talking about?" The soldier stepped forward, revealing a familiar face. "Marta sent me. She's with the resistance. She wants to help you." Clint's heart raced, a whirlwind of emotions crashing over him. Marta? You're lying. No. She's been feeding us information. She's not your enemy, she's trying to save you. Clint's mind reeled. The woman who had cared for him, who had shown him kindness, was somehow involved in the resistance. It felt like everything he knew was crumbling around him. But why didn't she tell me? He shouted, his voice filled with frustration. She couldn't risk it. Not until she knew she could trust you, the soldier explained, urgency in his tone. But you have to trust me now. We can get you out of here. As the realization dawned upon him, Clint looked at Hawk, whose breathing was shallow. Hawk, I can't leave you, he said, panic rising in his chest. Go, Clint. You have to finish this. I believe in you. Hawk's voice was weak but resolute. Clint felt tears prick at his eyes as he realized the gravity of the moment. He had to choose between saving his mentor and trusting the woman who had changed everything for him. But as he glanced at Hawk, he knew what he had to do. Let's go, Clint said, steeling himself. He turned to the soldier, who nodded, understanding the urgency of the situation. Together, they moved through the alley, leaving Hawk behind, the weight of his sacrifice heavy on Clint's heart. The soldier led him through the labyrinth of Paris, weaving in and out of shadows, until they emerged into a clearing. There, in the dim light, stood Marta, her expression fierce and determined. Clint, she called out, relief flooding her voice. Marta, you're part of the resistance, he asked, disbelief coloring his tone. I had to protect you, Clint. I couldn't risk your life, she replied, her eyes filled with sincerity. But now, we have a chance to turn the tide. Clint felt a swirl of emotions, anger, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw the truth. She had been fighting for more than just her country, she had been fighting for humanity amidst the chaos of war. Let's do this, Clint said, determination hardening in his chest. He had lost so much, but he wouldn't let it all be in vain. With Marta by his side, they could make a difference. As they prepared to face the enemy together, Clint realized that the battle was not just against the soldiers in uniforms but against the very essence of war itself. They were not just fighting for their countries, they were fighting for each other, for the hope of a better tomorrow. In that moment, with the weight of responsibility resting heavily on his shoulders, Clint understood what it truly meant to fight for his country, what it truly meant to fight for humanity. And as the sun set over the horizon, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, a promise that, no matter the cost, he would emerge from the darkness stronger than before. The cold wind howled through the streets of Paris, whipping around the remnants of a city that had once been a beacon of culture and freedom. Rubble lay strewn across the cobblestones, the echoes of laughter and music now replaced by the distant rumble of military vehicles and the haunting wails of sirens. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting shadows that danced like ghosts among the ruins, one thought consumed the mind of a young soldier: what does it truly mean to fight for your country? Clint Eastwood, a fresh-faced soldier barely out of his teens, stood before a dilapidated building on the outskirts of the city, the weight of his gear pressing down upon him. His heart raced in his chest, each beat a reminder of the mission ahead. A mission that could mean life or death, not just for him, but for countless others. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up and your instincts scream to run. But there was no running now, he had made a choice. In the moments that followed his escape from captivity, Clint and Hawk found themselves back in the familiar embrace of their battalion. The air was electric with the energy of soldiers preparing for their next move, but for Clint, the chaos felt surreal. He had walked through hell and returned, he had faced his fears and wrestled with his conscience. Now, standing amidst his comrades, he felt a newfound sense of purpose. Sergeant Hawkins, his mentor and protector, could see the change in Clint's demeanor. The boy he had once known was evolving into a soldier, a man forged by the fires of war. You did good out there, Clint, Hawk said, clapping him on the back. You kept your head when it mattered most. That's what makes a soldier. But Clint was not just a soldier, he was a bridge between enemies, a bridge between ideologies. Hawk, he began, I think I understand now. It's not just about fighting for your country. Sometimes, it's about fighting for the people you meet along the way. It's about the humanity we share, regardless of the side we're on. Hawk nodded, his eyes glistening with pride. You've learned a hard lesson, Clint, but it's one that will serve you well. Remember, the war isn't black and white, it's filled with shades of gray. With that wisdom resonating in his heart, Clint stepped forward, ready to share the intelligence he had gathered about the impending German attack. He stood before his commanding officer, his voice steady even as the weight of his decision pressed down on him. Sir, I have information that could save lives. I need to tell you about the enemy's plans. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Clint recounted the details he had learned from Marta, the resistance fighter who had shown him a side of humanity he never expected to find in the heart of the enemy. He spoke of the plans, the locations, and the timing, each word dripping with urgency. As he finished, a murmur swept through the room. His commander stepped forward, a look of respect on his face. Well done, Private Eastwood. Your bravery and loyalty will not go unnoticed. We'll act on this information immediately. In that moment, Clint felt a swell of pride. He had chosen to act not just for himself or his fellow soldiers, but for everyone in the city caught in the crossfire of war. His heart raced, not from fear, but from the exhilaration of knowing he had made a difference. Days turned into weeks as the battalion prepared for the counteroffensive. Clint trained harder than ever, his mind sharpened by the lessons he had learned. He found joy in the camaraderie of his fellow soldiers, a brotherhood that brought warmth amidst the cold realities of war. But he also carried the memory of Marta in his heart, a reminder that there were always two sides to every story. One fateful night, as the battalion moved into position, Clint caught sight of a familiar face among the rubble, a fleeting glimpse of a nurse tending to the wounded. His heart skipped a beat. It was Marta. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The war had not just been about battles and strategies, it had been about connections, about understanding that each life mattered. With a newfound resolve, Clint made a decision. He would find her. He would show her that he understood now. He would bridge that gap between them, even if the world around them was crumbling. Running through the chaos, he dodged debris and kept moving, fueled by the hope of reconciliation. Finally, he found her, crouched over a wounded soldier, her hands steady and skilled. Marta, he called out, his voice breaking through the noise of war. She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise, then softened at the sight of him. Clint, she whispered, disbelief mingling with relief. I'm here, he said, breathing heavy. I understand now. I see you, who you are beyond the uniform. You're fighting for them just as I am for my people. Tears filled her eyes. I never wanted this war. I just want to help. And you are, he replied, stepping closer. We're not so different, you and I. We both want to save lives. In that moment, amidst the chaos, they found a sliver of peace, a fragile bond formed through shared humanity. Clint took her hands, and they both knew that despite the war raging around them, they had fought for something greater than victory, they had fought for understanding. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting light on the remnants of destruction, Clint stood tall beside Marta, feeling the weight of his journey lift. He had fallen from the sky, but now he had found his footing. He had discovered the true essence of bravery, not just in the face of danger, but in the willingness to connect, to empathize, and to love in the darkest of times. And as the battle unfolded, Clint knew he would carry this lesson with him, not just as a soldier, but as a man. A man who had learned that war may tear people apart, but it is the bonds of humanity that can ultimately bring them together. As the credits began to roll, a voiceover echoed in the background, urging viewers to reflect on the bonds they share with those around them. War may separate us by borders and ideologies, but it's our shared humanity that unites us in the end. Remember to cherish those connections in your own lives. If you enjoyed Clint's story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that inspire and remind us of the beauty in understanding each other. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next journey into the depths of human experience. With a heart full of hope and a spirit ignited by connection, Clint Eastwood stepped forward into the light of a new day, a soldier who fell from the sky and lived to tell a story of resilience, understanding, and the power of love.